The crystal towers of Zaporea caught the light of 3 suns and threw rainbows across the sky. Queen Lyra stood on her palace balcony and watched the colors dance. Her blue skin shimmered in the bright light. She was beautiful even by the high standards of her people, but today she felt tired. Being queen of the Asterian Empire was not easy. She ruled over 47 worlds and billions of people. Every day brought new problems to solve. Today was different though. Today she had to go to Harmony Point space station for the yearly trade talks. Lyra did not like these meetings. The other alien races always wanted something from her empire. They wanted technology, protection, or trade deals that helped them more than they. Asterians, most of them could barely think compared to her people. Ons could read minds and move objects with their thoughts. Other races seemed slow and dull. Your Majesty, said General Korath. As he walked onto the balcony, he was tall and strong with dark blue skin and silver eyes. The ship is ready. Lyra nodded. She put on her royal robes and followed him to the transport ship. Journey to Harmony Point took 3 hours. During that time, she read reports about the other delegates who would be at the meeting. There would be the bug-like Chitauri who wanted to buy Asterian weapons. The rock people called Granite wanted mining rights on empty planets. The fish-like Aquans needed new water purification systems, and then there were the humans. Humans were new to galactic politics. They had only joined the space community 50 years ago. Their planet Earth was far away on the edge of the galaxy. Most people thought humans were not very smart or special. They had no psychic powers and their technology was simple, but they were good at trade and making deals between other races. The I-Human delegate was someone called Jake Morrison. Lyra Lee had never met him, but she had heard he was skilled at solving problems between different species. Some said he had helped stop 3 wars just by talking to people. Harmony Point was a huge space station built inside an old asteroid. It floated in empty space between several star systems. No one owned it, which made it perfect for meetings between different races. Station was shaped like a wheel with docking bays around the outside and meeting rooms in the center. Lyra's ship docked smoothly. She walked through the metal corridors with her guards behind her. The station smelled of recycled air and alien cooking. Dozens of different species lived and worked here. She passed by tall, thin ethereals, short and hairy dwarven miners, and many others. The main meeting room was large and round. Each delegation had their own section with chairs and tables that their body types. Lyra took her place on the raised platform reserved for major powers. She could see all the other delegates from here. The Chitauri clicked and buzzed in their corner. The Granite sat still like statues. The Aquans kept their breathing tanks close by, and in the smallest section sat the human delegation. There were only 3 humans. 2 wore formal blue suits and carried data tablets. The third was different. He was tall but not too tall, with brown hair and kind eyes. He wore a simple gray jacket and seemed relaxed while everyone else looked nervous. This had to be Jake Morrison. The meeting started with boring speeches about trade routes and mining rights. Lyra listened with half her mind while watching the humans. The 2 Ensudes took notes and whispered to each other, but Jake just watched and listened. Sometimes he smiled at something a delegate said. After 2 Hours there was a break for lunch. Lyra usually ate alone in her private room during these events, but today she felt curious about the human who seemed so calm. She walked over to the human section. "You are Jake Morrison," she said. It was not a question. He stood up and gave a small bow. "Your Majesty, it is an honor to meet you." His voice was warm and friendly. Most aliens either feared her or tried to flatter her. Jake didn't neither. He seemed genuinely pleased to meet her. "I have heard you are good at solving problems," Lyra said. Jake smiled. "I try to help people understand each other. Sometimes the biggest problems come from small misunderstandings." They talked for a few minutes about the morning's discussions. Jake had clever ideas about how to make trade deals that helped everyone. He asked good questions and really listened to her answers. Lyra found herself enjoying the conversation. Over the next 3 days, they talked more. During breaks and meals, Jake told funny stories about his travels to different worlds. He had been to places even Lyra had never seen. He knew interesting facts about alien cultures and could speak several alien languages. But what surprised Lyra most was how Jake treated her. He was respectful but not afraid. He listened to her opinions and asked what she thought about things. Most people either wanted something from her or were too scared to talk normally. On the last day of the talks, there was a big problem. On the queue, Chitauri and the Aquans both wanted to buy the same rare metal from an asteroid field. They started arguing loudly. Chitauri clicked their mandibles angrily. The Aquans blew bubbles their tanks, which meant they were upset. The argument grew worse. Other delegates took sides. Soon the whole room was full of angry voices in dozens of languages. Lyra was about to use her psychic powers to force everyone to be quiet when Jake stood up. "Friends," he said in a normal voice. Somehow everyone heard him clearly. "I think there might be a solution here." He walked to the center of the room. "The Chitauri need this metal for their ship holes, right? And the Aquans need it for their underwater cities. But what if we look at this differently?" Jake pulled up a star map on the room's main screen. "There are actually 3 asteroid fields. With this metal, the Chitauri have been looking at Field Alpha because it is closest to their space. The Aquans want Field Beta because it has the purest metal. But look at Field Gamma." He pointed to a spot on the map. "Field Gamma has a different type of the same metal. It would work even better for Chitauri ships because it is lighter and it is much closer to Chitauri space, so transport cost would be lower." The Chitauri delegate clicked thoughtfully. "This metal would be suitable, better than suitable," Jake said. "Your ships would be faster and stronger, and the Aquans could have all of Field Beta for their cities." The Aquan delegate gurgled happily. "This would give us enough metal for 50 years of construction." In 10 minutes, Jake had solved a problem that could have caused a war. Everyone was happy. The other delegates looked at him with new respect. That evening there was a farewell dinner for all the delegates. Lyra found herself sitting next to Jake. They talked about books they had read and places they wanted to visit. Jake made her laugh with his stories about learning to eat with tentacles on a water world. "You are not what I expected," Lyra told him. "What did you expect?" Jake asked. "Someone more ordinary. Humans are supposed to be simple." Jake smiled. "Maybe we are. Maybe simple and ordinary are not the same thing." When the talks ended, Lyra Felt sad to leave. She had enjoyed talking with Jake more than any conversation she had had in years. As they said goodbye, Jake gave her a small gift, a book of earth poetry, something to remember our talks, he said. Lily took the book and felt something strange for just a moment when their hands touched. She thought she sensed something unusual. It was like looking at a deep lake and seeing shadows moving far below the surface. But the feeling passed so quickly, she decided she had imagined it. Back on Zahiria, Lyra could not stop thinking about the human delegate. She read his book of poetry and found herself wondering what Jake was doing on his distant Earth. For the first time in her long life, Queen Lyra of the Asturian Empire had met someone who made her want to know more. 6 months had passed since the meeting at Harmony Point. Lyra found herself thinking about Jake Morrison more often than she wanted to admit. She had read his book of earth poetry many times. The words were strange but beautiful. They spoke of love, hope, and seeing wonder in simple things. During those months, Jake had sent her messages through the galactic communication network. At first they were formal thank you notes for the successful trade talks. Then they became longer letters about his travels and work. Jake wrote about visiting new worlds and helping solve disputes between different species. Lyra started writing back. She told him about life on Zapiria and the challenges of ruling an empire. Jake always had thoughtful answers to her questions. He never asked for favors or tried to get special treatment for humans. He just seemed genuinely interested in talking with her. One day, Jake sent a message saying he would be traveling near Asturian space on business. He asked if he could visit Zafiria to see her world. Lyra felt excited in a way she had not felt for years. She quickly sent back an invitation. When Jake's small earthship arrived at Zapiria, Lyra met him at the Royal Spaceport herself. This surprised her staff. Queens usually sent servants to greet visitors, but Lyra wanted to see Jake. As soon as he arrived, Jake stepped off his ship wearing the same simple clothes she remembered. He smiled when he saw her and gave the same respectful bow as before. Your Majesty, he said, thank you for inviting me to your beautiful world. Welcome to Zapiria. Lyra replied, I hope you will enjoy your visit. She showed him around the crystal city herself. They walked through gardens filled with singing flowers and fountains that played music. Jake was amazed by everything he saw. He asked good questions about Asturian culture and history. Your people have built something wonderful here, Jake said as they stood on a bridge over a silver river. It must be incredible to read each other's thoughts. Sometimes, Lyra said, but it can be lonely too. When everyone can see into your mind, it is hard to have private thoughts. Jake looked at her with understanding. That must be especially difficult for a queen. You probably cannot show weakness or doubt. Lyra was surprised. Most people thought being able to read minds made life easier. Jake was the first person to realize it might also be hard. They spent a week together. Jake was a perfect guest. He was polite to her servants and guards. He learned some words in the Asturian language. He even tried to eat traditional Asturian food, though some of it made him sick because human stomachs were different. General Koreth did not like having a human in the palace. He thought Jake was trying to spy on Asturian secrets, but Jake never asked about military things or tried to go to restricted areas. He seemed more interested in art, music, and stories about Astrian history. On Jake's last night, Lyra took him to the highest tower of the palace. From there, they could see the lights of the city. Spread out below like stars, the 3 moons of Zapiria hung in the purple sky. "It is beautiful," Jake said quietly. Yes, Lyra agreed, but she was looking at him, not the view. They talked about many things that night. Jake told her about Earth and his family there. Lyra shared memories of her childhood and her fears about being a good queen. As the night grew late, they sat closer together on the stone bench. "I have to ask you something," Ly said. "Why are you not married? You are kind, intelligent, and well-raveled. Surely there are women on Earth who would want to be with you." Jake was quiet for a moment. "I have been waiting," he said finally. "For what? For someone who sees me as I really am," Jake said. "Not as what they want me to be or what they think I should be, just me." Lyra felt her heart beat faster. She had been thinking the same thing about herself. "And have you found such a person?" Jake turned to look at her. His eyes were serious. "I think I might have." That night, under the light of 3 moons, they kissed for the first time. Lyra really felt something she had never experienced before. It was not just physical attraction. It was as if she had found a part of herself she did not know was missing. Jake left the next morning, but they both knew things had changed between them. The messages they sent each other became more personal. They talked about their hopes, dreams, and fear. They shared jokes and told each other about their daily lives. 3 months later, Jake asked if he could come back to Zahiria. This time he stayed for 2 weeks, then a month. Then he asked if he could make his home there. The royal council was shocked when Lyra announced she wanted to marry the human. General Korth was furious. "Your Majesty," he said during an emergency council meeting, "this is madness. Humans are a primitive species. They have no psychic abilities. They live for only a few decades. What can this human offer you that an Asturian noble cannot?" Lyra stood up from her throne. Her blue skin glowed with anger. "Jake offers me respect, understanding, and genuine affection. He does not want to marry me for my power or my wealth. He wants to marry me because he loves me as I am." "But Your Majesty," said Counselor, "what about children? Humans and Asturians cannot have offspring together. The royal bloodline will end with you." Lyra had thought about this. It made her sad, but not sad enough to give up her happiness. "Then we will adopt children who need families. There are many orphans in the empire who would benefit from royal protection." The arguments went on for weeks. Some council members threatened to resign. Others spoke of rebellion. But Lyra would not change her mind. She loved Jake and she believed he loved her. News of the coming royal wedding spread across the galaxy. Some species were curious, others were shocked, a few were angry that a primitive human was marrying into such a powerful royal family. Jake handled the attention with his usual calm manner. He did not give interviews to galactic news services. He did not try to use his relationship with Lyra for political gain. He just continued to be himself. The wedding was held in the great crystal cathedral of Zahiria. Representatives from dozens of worlds came to watch. The ceremony followed ancient Asturian traditions, but Jake had learned all the proper words and rituals. When they exchanged vows, Lyra tried to touch Jake's mind with her psychic abilities. It was an old Asterian custom that let married couples share thoughts and feelings, but something strange happened. Instead of the open, warm, mental connection she expected, Lyra felt something like a wall, not a hostile wall, but something that gently turned her psychic touch away. It was as if Jake's mind was protected by some kind of shield she had never encountered before. Jake seemed to notice her confusion. He squeezed her hand and smiled. "Is everything all right?" he whispered. Lily decided she had been nervous and imagined it. "Everything is perfect," she whispered back. After the ceremony, there was a great feast. Jake charmed the wedding guests with his stories and jokes. Even some of the Asterian nobles who had opposed the marriage seemed to like him. He danced with Lyra under the crystal lights, and for a moment, all her worries disappeared. That night, in their new shared chambers, Jake and Laurel talked quietly about their future. Together, Jake seemed genuinely happy to be staying on Zaporea. He wanted to learn more about Asterian culture and maybe help with diplomatic work. "Are you sure you will not miss Earth?" Lyra asked. "Earth will always be my home world," Jake said, "but home is where the people you love are. My home is with you." Now, Lyra felt warm and content. She had found love with someone who truly cared for her. She had no idea that in just a few months everything would change. She had no idea that her new husband was hiding secrets that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. But that night, none of that mattered. That night, she was just a woman in love with her new husband, dreaming of a future filled with happiness and peace. The first sign of trouble came 3 months after the royal wedding. A mining colony on the edge of Asterian space went silent. When rescue ships arrived, they found nothing but empty buildings and scattered equipment. 20,000 colonists had simply disappeared without any sign of struggle or damage to their city. Lyra stood in the war room deep beneath the Crystal Palace, studying holographic displays of the lost colony. General Korath and his officers surrounded the table, their faces grim. There were no distress signals. General Korath reported no signs of battle. The colony's defense systems were still active when we arrived. It is as if the people just vanished into thin air. Jake stood quietly in the corner, listening. Since their marriage, Lyra had included him in important meetings. Some of the generals did not like having a human present during military discussions, but they accepted it because their queen wished it. Could it have been a natural disaster? Lyra asked. Some kind of space phenomenon we have not seen before. Unlikely, Your Majesty, said Admiral Nexus. The buildings were intact. The power systems were still running. Even the food in the kitchens was fresh. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. In all her years as queen, she had never encountered anything like this. The Asterian Empire was powerful and well protected. Their psychic abilities usually gave them advanced warning of any threats. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Another colony, this one deeper in a steering space, went silent overnight. This time the rescue teams found something even more disturbing. The colonists were still there, but they were all unconscious. They lay in their beds, in their workplaces, even in the streets, as if they had all fallen asleep at the same moment. The medical teams could not wake them up. The colonists were alive, but completely unresponsive. Their minds seemed to be empty, as if something had drained away their thoughts and personalities. "We are dealing with an unknown enemy," General Korath declared during an emergency council session, "something that can attack our people without using conventional weapons. I recommend we mobilize the full fleet and place all border worlds on high alert." Lyra nodded, but she felt helpless. How could they fight an enemy they could not see or understand? She noticed Jake watching the holographic displays with intense concentration. His face was serious in a way she had not seen before. Over the next month, 5 more colonies were attacked. The pattern was always the same: no warning, no visible enemy, and the colonists either disappeared or fell into the strange unconscious state. Fear began to spread throughout the empire. Lyra found herself working 18-hour days, coordinating the military response and trying to keep her people calm. The stress was affecting her psychic abilities. Sometimes when she tried to read reports, the words would blur together. When she attempted to communicate telepathically with her admirals, the mental connection would fade in and out like a weak radio signal. Jake was always there to support her. He brought her meals when she forgot to eat. He listened when she needed to talk about her fears. He gave her massages when the tension made her neck and shoulders ache. But lately, Lyra Lee noticed something odd about her husband. Jake seemed to know things before they were reported. He would suggest checking certain star systems just hours before those same systems would report problems. He would recommend moving ships to specific locations that later proved to be exactly where they were needed. When Lyra Lee asked how he knew, Jake would just smile and say he had a good feeling about it. There were other strange things too. Sometimes palace security cameras would malfunction when Jake walked past them. Computer systems would occasionally display error messages in languages that did not exist in any database. Once Lyra Lee saw Jake standing in the palace garden during a thunderstorm, apparently unbothered by the lightning and rain that was soaking everything around him. But the strangest thing was what happened when she tried to touch his mind with her psychic abilities. Every time she attempted the mental connection that Austrian couples shared, she encountered that same gentle but impenetrable barrier. It was like trying to read a book written in invisible ink. The crisis reached its peak when long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching the Zephyria system. The ships were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They seemed to be made of a dark material that absorbed light and sensor beams. There were hundreds of them moving in perfect formation. "They will reach our outer defenses in 6 hours, Admiral Nexus reported. "All available ships are moving to intercept. But Your Majesty, these vessels are larger than anything we have ever faced." Lyra stood on the command deck of the royal flagship, watching the approaching enemy through the viewports. Her entire fleet was arrayed around Zephyria, ready to defend their home world. The crystal defense satellites were charging their psychic weapon arrays. Every Asterian with strong mental abilities was prepared to join the psychic assault. Jake stood beside her, looking out at the dark ships. He was very quiet, and Lyra Lee could see tension in his shoulders that had not been there before. "Jake," she said softly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." He turned to look at her, his brown eyes serious. What is it? You are not what you seem to be, are you? Lally said. I have been noticing things, strange things. You know information before it is reported. Technology behaves oddly around you, and I cannot read your mind at all. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Outside the viewport, the enemy ships continued their approach. Warning alarms echoed through the ship as the crew prepared for battle. You are right, Jake said. Finally, I am not what I seem to be. But I need you to know that my feelings for you are completely real. I love you. Lally, that was never a lie. Before Lai could respond, explosions lit up space around them. The battle had begun. Asterian ships fired their energy weapons at the dark vessels, but they beams seemed to be absorbed without causing any damage. The psychic assault from the defense satellites had no effect either. The enemy ships returned fire with weapons that defied understanding. Instead of energy beams or missiles, they seemed to attack reality itself. Asterian ships would simply stop existing as if they had never been built. Others would become twisted into impossible shapes that hurt to look at. The fleet is taking heavy losses, Admiral Nexus reported, his voice shaking. Our weapons are completely ineffective. We cannot even scan their ships properly. Lyra Life felt panic rising in her chest. Her empire, which had seemed so powerful and secure, was being destroyed by an enemy she could not even comprehend. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically to coordinate the defense, but it was clear they were losing badly. Jake put his hand on her shoulder. Lily, I need to tell you who I really am, but first, I need you to order all your ships to stop attacking and pull back to a safe distance. What? Lily stared at him. Jake, we are fighting for the survival of my people. I cannot just stop the battle. Trust me, Jake said. His voice had changed. It was still warm and kind, but there was something else there now. Something that made the air around him seem to vibrate with hidden power. Please order your ships to retreat. I will handle this. Lyra looked into his eyes and saw something that took her breath away. For just a moment, the mental barrier around Jake's mind flickered and she caught a glimpse of what lay behind it. It was like looking into the heart of a star, or trying to count all the raindrops in an ocean. The power hidden inside her husband's mind was so vast that her psychic abilities could not even begin to measure it. All ships, she said into her communicator, her voice barely steady. Retreat to minimum safe distance. Do not engage the enemy until further orders. Jake smiled at her, the same gentle smile she had fallen in love with. Thank you for trusting me. He walked to the center of the bridge and did something impossible. The hull of the ship simply opened around him, creating a doorway where solid metal had been. A moment before, air should have rushed out into space, but it did not. Jake stepped through the opening and stood in the vacuum of space as if he were walking in a garden. Through the viewport, Lyra watched her husband approach the enemy fleet. He moved without any kind of spacecraft or protection, simply walking through space toward the dark ships. As he got closer, something extraordinary happened. The enemy ships stopped moving. They hung motionless in space as if frozen in time. Then one by one they began to change. The dark material that covered them peeled away like old paint, revealing the true nature of the vessels. Underneath, they were not ships at all, but something far stranger and more terrifying. The enemy was not alive in any way that Lyra could understand. Yet, it was not simply a machine either. It was something from outside normal reality, something that existed in the spaces between thoughts and dreams. Jake floated in space before the largest enemy vessel and began to speak, but he was not using any language that existed in the galaxy. He was speaking in mathematics and physics, in concepts that bypassed words entirely. Even through the hull of her ship, Lyra could feel the power of that conversation. Though she could not understand it, the enemy responded in the same impossible language. The exchange continued for several minutes while the entire battle fleet watched in amazement. Finally, Jake nodded and turned back. Lily stood in her private chambers looking out at the stars. 3 hours had passed since Jake had somehow defeated an entire enemy fleet by talking to them. 3 hours since her understanding of the universe had been completely shattered. Jake sat in a chair behind her, waiting patiently for her to speak. The bridge crew had been sworn to secrecy about what they had witnessed. General Koreth and the admirals were handling the cleanup and rescue operations, but here in the quiet of their rooms, Lyra finally had a chance to process what had happened. The enemy called themselves the Silence. Jake said softly, "They are not really alive, but they are not machines either. They are something that was created long ago by a race that no longer exists." Lyra turned to face him. What did they want? To eliminate all telepathic species in the galaxy. Jake replied, "The race that created them believed that psychic abilities would eventually destroy the universe. So they built the Silence to hunt down and destroy any civilization that developed mental powers." But why did they attack now? Asterians have had psychic abilities for thousands of years. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Because your empire has been expanding, your psychic technology has grown stronger. The Silence has been dormant for millions of years, but the increasing reach of Asterian mental abilities woke them up. Lyra Lele felt a chill. "Are you saying this is our fault?" "No," Jake said firmly. "The Silence is wrong. Psychic abilities are not dangerous to the universe. They are just another form of life and intelligence. The race that created the Silence was destroyed by their own fear, not by telepaths." "How do you know all this?" Lyra asked. "And how were you able to stop them?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was sad. "Because my people have been fighting the Silence for longer than most species have existed. We have been protecting the galaxy from threats like them for millions of years." "Your people?" Lyra stared at him. "You mean humans?" "Yes and no." Jake turned back to her. "What you call humans are not exactly what we seem to be. We are older than any records show." "Much older?" Lyra sat down heavily in her chair. "I do not understand." Jake walked over and knelt beside her chair. "May I show you? It would be easier than trying to explain with words." Lily hesitated. She had been trying to read Jake's mind for months, without success. "Can you lower your mental barriers?" "I do not have mental barriers," Jake said gently. "What you have been sensing is not a wall around my mind. It is the edge of something much larger." He held out his hand. Lyra looked at it for a moment, then took it in both of hers. "Show me," she said the moment their skin touched. Lyra's psychic abilities connected with Jake's mind, but instead of the familiar sensation of touching another person's thoughts, she felt as if she had dived into an ocean that had no bottom. Jake's consciousness was vast beyond anything she could have imagined. His mind existed in multiple dimensions at once. He was simultaneously Jake Morrison, the charming human trade negotiator, and something far more complex. He was connected to a network of intelligences that spanned the entire galaxy and beyond. Through their connection, Lyra saw the true history of humanity. They were not a young species that had recently discovered space travel. They were ancient beyond measure, older than the Astarans, older than any civilization currently in the galaxy. They had been guiding and protecting younger species for so long that they had almost forgotten their own origins. Humans had learned long ago how to exist in multiple states of reality at once. They could be simple, primitive people living on a small planet while simultaneously being cosmic guardians with power beyond understanding. They chose to appear weak and harmless because they had learned that great power attracted great responsibility. We call ourselves the Watchers, Jake's voice echoed in her mind. We watch over the galaxy and protect it from threats that younger civilizations cannot handle. The silence is one of many such threats we have faced over the eons. Lyra saw flashes of battles fought in dimensions she could not name against enemies that existed outside normal space and time. She saw humans who looked just like Jake standing against forces that could destroy entire star systems. She saw the careful work of guiding primitive species toward wisdom and peace without them ever knowing they were being helped. Why did you marry me? She asked through their mental link. Was it just to position yourself to protect the Astrian Empire? Jake's emotions flowed through the connection, and Lyra felt the depth of his love for her. It was real and powerful and completely genuine. I was sent to watch over your people because we knew the silence would eventually target them, but falling in love with you was not part of the plan. That was entirely real. What happens now? Lally asked. The silence is gone, but surely there will be other threats. There will always be other threats, Jake agreed. But humanity is not the only guardian species in the universe. There are others, some even older than us. Together we try to maintain balance and protect life wherever it grows. Lie pulled back from the mental connection. Feeling overwhelmed, Jake's hand was still in hers, warm and familiar. Looking at him, she could see both versions of him at once, the simple human man she had married and the cosmic guardian he truly was. Are there other humans like you in the galaxy? She asked. Many, Jake said. We have been placing ourselves in key positions throughout civilized space for millennia. Trade negotiators, diplomats, merchants, explorers, even entertainers and artists. We live normal lives among other species while quietly watching for problems that require our intervention. Does anyone else know? A few individuals among the older species have figured it out over the years, but most governments and civilizations have no idea. We prefer it that way. It is easier to help people when they do not know they are being helped. Lyra stood up and walked to her desk. She picked up the book of Earth poetry that Jake had given her months ago. Even this was not what it seemed, was it? Jake smiled. Actually, that really is just a book of poetry. I thought you might enjoy it. Not everything about me is mysterious and cosmic. I do genuinely like poetry, despite everything. Lily found herself smiling back. So you are telling me I married a being with the Power of a god who enjoys reading poetry and making trade deals. When you put it like that, it does sound rather odd, Jake admitted. Lai set the book down and looked at him. Seriously, what does this mean for us, for our marriage? Can we have a normal life together, or will you be called away to fight cosmic threats every few months? Jake stood up and walked to her. He took her hands in his and looked into her eyes. That depends on you. Now that you know the truth, you have a choice. You can ask me to leave and return to my people. Your empire will still be protected. Other watchers will ensure that, or you can accept what I am and we can build a life together. And if I choose to stay with you, what would that mean? It would mean that sometimes I might have to leave for a while to deal with problems elsewhere in the galaxy, but I would always come back to you. It would mean that our home would be safe from threats most people cannot even imagine, and it would mean that you would be married to someone who can show you wonders beyond anything you have ever dreamed. Lyra thought about everything she had learned. The man she loved was not just a man. He was part of something vast and ancient and powerful. Her life would never be simple or ordinary, but then again, her life had never been simple or ordinary. She was a queen who ruled an empire of psychic beings. Normal had never really been an option for her. I have one more question, she said. Did you manipulate my feelings for you? Did you use some kind of power to make me fall in love? Jake's expression became very serious. Never, I swear to you on everything I hold sacred, I have never used any ability to influence your emotions or thoughts. Your feelings are entirely your own. Lally looked into his eyes and used her psychic abilities to sense the truth of his words. She felt no deception, no manipulation. His love for her was as real as her love for him. Then I choose to stay with you, she said, not because you are powerful or mysterious, but because you are kind and funny, and you make me feel like I am more than just a queen. I love Jake Morrison, the poetry reading trade negotiator, not Jake Morrison, the cosmic guardian. Jake smiled, and for a moment he was just her husband again. They are the same person, he said. I am both of those things, and I am yours. They kissed then, and Lyra felt the strange sensation of kissing someone who existed in multiple dimensions at once. It should have been overwhelming, but instead it felt like coming home. Outside their window, the stars continued to shine. Somewhere among them, other watchers continued their ancient duty of protecting and guiding younger civilizations. But here in this room on this crystal world, two very different beings had found love that transcended species and realities. The galaxy was a stranger and more wonderful place than most people knew, and Lyra was married to one of its greatest guardians. She found that she was looking forward to whatever came next. 1 year later, Queen Lyra stood in the same crystal cathedral where she had married Jake, but this time the ceremony was very different. Representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy had come to Zahiria for the first Galactic Unity Summit. The news of humanity's true nature had spread slowly through diplomatic channels over the past months. Jake had worked carefully with leaders from various species to reveal the truth about the Watchers. Some governments had been angry about the deception. Others had been grateful to learn they had been protected. A few had demanded proof, which Jake had provided. by solving several cosmic threats that would have been impossible for younger civilizations to handle. Today Jake was formally introducing the galaxy to the concept of the Watchers. He stood at the center of the cathedral, no longer pretending to be just a simple trade negotiator. When he spoke, his words were translated into dozens of languages by advanced communication devices. For millions of years, Jake said, my people have watched over this galaxy in secret. We have prevented wars, stopped cosmic disasters, and protected young civilizations from threats they were not ready to face. We did this in secret because we believed it was better for each species to develop naturally, without knowing they were being guided. A representative from the Chitauri delegation clicked loudly. Why reveal yourselves now? What has changed? Jake smiled. What has changed is that many of you are no longer young civilizations. You have grown wise and strong enough to handle the truth, and some threats like the silence require cooperation between species to be truly defeated. The Granite's ambassador, a being made of living stone, spoke in a voice like grinding rocks. What do you want from us in return for this protection? Nothing, Jake replied. This is not a trade agreement. We do not protect you because we want something from you. We protect you because it is the right thing to do. Lyra watched from the royal section, feeling proud of her husband. Over the past year, she had learned much more about the Watchers in their work. Jake had taken her to see some of their hidden bases throughout the galaxy. She had met other Watchers who had been working among different species for centuries. Some looked human, but others had taken on the appearance of whatever species they were protecting. There was a Watcher who looked like a Chitauri and had been working as a historian in their archives for 300 years. Another had lived as an Asturian noble for 2 centuries, helping to guide their empires' development. The most surprising thing Lyra had learned was that the Watchers were not originally from Earth. They had come from a galaxy far away, drawn by the potential they saw in the young civilizations of this region of space. Earth had simply been their first base of operations, and over time they had genuinely become part of human civilization. After the formal presentations, there was a reception in the palace gardens. Laurel moved among the delegates, using her diplomatic skills to help ease tensions between species that had never trusted each other before. She found Jake talking quietly with General Korath near a fountain of singing water. To her surprise, the two men seemed to be getting along well. Your Majesty, General Korath said when he saw her approaching, your husband has been explaining some of the threats the Watchers have protected us from over the years. I admit I owe him an apology for my earlier suspicions. Jake shook his head. No apology needed. General, you were doing your job by being suspicious of outsiders. A good general should question anything that seems too convenient. Still, Korath continued, I accused you of being a spy when you were actually a guardian. There is a difference. Over the next several days, the summit continued with workshops and planning sessions. Galaxy civilizations began to work together in ways they never had before. They shared information about potential threats, coordinated their exploration efforts, and established new trade agreements that benefited everyone. Jake found himself busier than ever, but in a different way. Instead of working in Secret to solve problems, he was now openly consulting with governments and helping them prepare for challenges they might face. Other watchers had also revealed themselves to the species they had been protecting. The revelation had not been without problems. Some terrorist groups accused their governments of being controlled by aliens. A few extremist movements tried to attack known watcher locations, but overall the galaxy had adapted to the truth better than many had expected. One evening, as Lyra and Jake walked through the palace garden, she asked him about something that had been bothering her. Do you ever regret giving up your secret? She said. It must have been simpler when no one knew what you really were. Jake considered the question as they sat on a bench beside a pool of silver fish. Sometimes, he admitted, there are definitely complications now that we did not have before, but I think it was time. The galaxy is growing up. Young civilizations are becoming mature ones. They deserve to know the truth about their place in the universe. And what about us? Lyra asked. Has our marriage become more complicated now that everyone knows you are a watcher? Jake took her hand and smiled. In some ways, yes, we get a lot more attention now, but in the ways that matter, nothing has changed. I still love you. You still make terrible tea. I still cannot understand why Asterians think breakfast should include 17 different kinds of fruit. Lyra laughed and playfully pushed his shoulder. My tea is not terrible, you just have no appreciation for subtle flavors. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fish swim in patterns that seemed almost like writing. Finally, Lally spoke again. Jake, I have been thinking about something. You have shown me some of the wonders beyond our world, but I have never seen Earth, your original home. Jake looked surprised. Would you like to visit Earth? Very much. I know it is not really your original home world, but it is where your people have lived for so long. I would like to see where you grew up. I would love to show you Earth, Jake said. Though I should warn you, it is much less advanced than Zahiria. Most humans there still do not know about the Watchers or the galactic community. To them, it is still a primitive world, trying to reach the stars. That sounds wonderful, Lyra said. I would like to see a simpler world for a while. 2 weeks later, they took a small Watcher ship to Earth. The journey took several days, during which Jake told Lyra stories about human history and culture. He explained how the Watchers had guided humanity's development while allowing them to believe they were achieving everything on their own. Earth was beautiful in a way that was completely different from Zafiria, where her world was all crystal and light and perfection. Earth was wild and varied and sometimes chaotic. They visited forests where trees grew without any planning or design. They stood on beaches where waves crashed against rocks that had been shaped by millions of years of natural forces. Jake took her to the small town where he had grown up. They walked through streets where normal humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware that one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy was living quietly among them. Do you miss this? Lyra asked, as they sat in a small cafe drinking coffee. The simplicity of it. Sometimes, Jake said, there is something peaceful about a world where the biggest problem is whether it will rain tomorrow. But I could never give up the work I do or the life I have with you. On their last night on Earth, they stood on a hill overlooking the lights of a human city. The stars above looked different from Earth, but they were the same stars that shone on Zephyria and all the other worlds throughout the galaxy. I have a confession to make, Jake said. When I first came to the trade talks at Harmony Point, I was not there to meet you specifically. I was investigating reports of unusual energy readings in and space. Meeting you and falling in love was completely unexpected. Lyra smiled. So you are saying that the most powerful love story in galactic history happened by accident? The best things usually do. Jake replied. They kissed under the Earth stars, two beings from different worlds and different levels of reality, who had found something that transcended all their differences. When they returned to Zephyria, they found that the Galactic Unity Summit had led to the formation of a new organization called the Cosmic Alliance. Species throughout the galaxy were working together more closely than ever before. The Watchers had transitioned from secret guardians to open advisors and protectors. Lyra and Jake settled into their new life. Together, she continued to rule the Asterian Empire, but now with the knowledge that her people were part of something much larger. Jake worked with the Alliance to coordinate defenses against cosmic threats and to help younger civilizations develop safely. They faced new challenges and adventures. Together, there were threats from outside the galaxy that required Jake to travel to distant dimensions. There were diplomatic crises that needed Lyra's wisdom and experience, but they always faced these challenges as a team. Years passed, the galaxy grew more peaceful and united under the Alliance's guidance. New species were discovered and welcomed into the galactic community. Old enemies became friends and allies. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lyra and Jake stood once again on the balcony of the Crystal Palace where their story had begun.